Exodia is one of the most legendary monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm sure every one of us has had a conversation with a long-lost Yu-Gi-Oh! Player who proudly told us that they once owned all of the pieces back in the day. What's especially odd to me about the regard with which so many hold Exodia is that it was only truly summoned one time in the anime. Sure, it made several appearances, as well as being fodder for the summons of Exodia retrains, but the only time it was summoned without cheating was in Yugi's very first duel with Kaiba. The rare hunter that summoned him used cards that were marked with invisible ink in the sub, and just flat out fakes in the original version of the episode. Never mind his blatant disregard for the Forbidden Unlimited list. The only other time Exodia hits the field is when Shimon summons it as his Ka in an attempt to defeat Zark, and seeing how this summon was performed with a giant concrete rectangle and not by acquiring all 5 pieces, I don't think this should count either. But why should that matter, and why is it split into 5 pieces in the first place? Well, I'm glad you asked. The story of Osiris, like many in Egyptian mythology, was told in fragments, and often not in chronological order as one cohesive story. This being the case, there are many different versions of the story, as pieces were often adapted to fit the purpose of whatever reason the story was being told at the time. These often contradict each other, but there is a largely agreed upon version of the story from start to finish. We'll just go ahead and fast forward through the siblings marrying each other parts of the story and get right to the important stuff. Isis, goddess of love, healing, fertility, magic, and the moon, had grown distressed at the violence and cannibalism that plagued the people of Egypt. To put these atrocities to rest, her brother husband Osiris, eventual god of the underworld, went out on a quest to share knowledge with his people. He traveled far and wide, bringing with him information on how to farm crops, bake bread, and brew beer. He would share with them the gifts of music and poetry. In his absence, his brother Set had grown envious of the reverence Osiris would receive on account of his selfless deeds. Set would commission the construction of an ornate chest, designed to the exact dimensions of his brother's body. Upon Osiris's return, Set would throw a great feast, attended by 72 of his closest friends in celebration of his older brother. Once all had their fill of food and wine, Set would present the chest, claiming that whomever could fit themselves perfectly within it would be the new owner of the beautiful piece. Many would try and fail, until Osiris requested a turn. Once inside, Osiris would notice his perfect fit within, then proudly proclaiming, "The chest is mine." Set, pleased with his plan unfolding perfectly, would then slam shut the lid, and all of his guests would assist him in sealing it with nails. The chest would then be dumped into the Nile River, where it would eventually settle near the base of a tamarisk tree. This tree, now imbued with the body of a god, would grow more beautiful than any others, and so the mayor of a nearby town would claim it for his own. Soon after, Isis would infiltrate the town in search of her husband's body. Once discovering the tree, she would claim the chest and leave the tree behind as a gift to the townsmen. Isis would recruit the power of Thoth, the god of wisdom, writing, and magic, in an attempt to resurrect Osiris for a brief moment in hopes of having just enough time to become pregnant. But she was found out, and Set would steal away the corpse before dismembering it into 14 pieces and scattering them across the Nile Valley. Isis, steadfast in her purpose, would head out in search of the pieces. Once all were reclaimed, and once again with the help of Thoth, Isis would bring Osiris back from the dead and instantly become pregnant with a son, Horus. Isis would protect her son for many years until he was old enough to challenge his uncle for the throne of Egypt. After a series of bloody battles, Horus would eventually leave victorious, reclaiming his rightful place atop the throne. This story is considered one of the most popular in Egyptian mythology because of its relatability to real people and the values they hold dear. The themes of loyalty and family are prevalent. These themes are echoed throughout all of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, but especially so the first time we see Exodia. Yugi's hunt for the pieces of Exodia were done in an attempt to bring down Kaiba and avenge his grandfather. Likewise, Isis sought the pieces of Osiris to give birth to Horus, who would then bring down Set. The way in which Yugi loses Exodia in the anime also reflects the story of Osiris. Weevil throws the pieces overboard into the ocean, and Set dumps Osiris into the Nile River. In both instances, the ornate box that contains the god is present. The obvious difference being that Joey, unlike Isis, fails to recover all the pieces. This summon of Exodia was also the first, and in my opinion only time it was ever accomplished by a duelist. Likewise, Osiris was the first god to have been brought back from the dead. As for the retrained monsters, the legendary Exodia incarnate seems to simply be the completed form of all of the pieces being assembled. Exodius, the ultimate forbidden lord, may not even be the same monster at all. It's the only Exodia monster with exposed skin on its feet and hands, and in the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime, Adrian Gecko refers to this monster as a distant cousin of Exodia. And Exodia Necros appears to be a depiction of Osiris after becoming the god of the underworld. It still retains its spellcaster typing. However, its changed appearance and new name would reflect that of a zombified Exodia. Now when I went in search of why Exodia is 5 pieces specifically as opposed to any other number, I couldn't find much. But I did come across an idea that could have some merit. YouTuber Enigma made a video entitled "This arc is way better than you remembered." It's a great video worth checking out in its entirety, but for my purposes we are focused on the timestamp on screen now. In this segment of the video, Enigma purports that the 5 pieces of Exodia are so because the main friend group in the anime consists of 5 people: Joey, Tristan, Taya, Yugi, and Atem. In the original Season 0 in manga, Atem would not have been considered as a 5th member and is replaced by Miho. I think this has some potential for being accurate, however being able to decide whether Atem counts or not based on if he's needed feels flimsy to me. My theory is far more boring. The reason that it is 5 cards is because that is the size of an opening hand. That would make it possible, though incredibly unlikely, to open Exodia turn 1. The odds of doing this in a 40 card deck would be 1 in 658,008, or 0.00002%, but this is still greater than the 0% odds would they have stuck with the full 14 pieces described in the myth. Luckily, these abysmal odds will haunt us no longer, as Konami has recently revealed a brand new set of Exodia support cards, the center of which is the Phantom Exodia Incarnate. The materials for this new fusion boss monster being, you guessed it, the 5 pieces of Exodia. This is an in-game representation of the ritual performed by Isis and Thoth to bring about a second coming of their fallen god Osiris, just long enough to change the tides of war. It even has a life cost effect representing the tenuous nature of Osiris's revived body, costing the player more life with each passing turn, until finally fading back to the underworld. For now, this is about all we are left with regarding Exodia, but I think it's safe to assume Konami will give us some new support and lore in the future to obliterate.